Good morning, everybody, and welcome to full council today, Thursday the 13th of October. First item on our agenda are declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Just in case it should be mentioned within some of the reports, I'd like to say that I represent the Council on the Local Enterprise Partnership Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Can I declare an interest in items 14 and 15 as a recipient of BEES funding and a very occasional user of the GoEV scheme, but I'm intending to stay in the chamber for both items.
Thank you. Councillor Legg?
Likewise, I was a recipient of BEES funding.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 2 on our agenda are minutes of the previous meeting. You have them in front of you, members. Are there any issues with these minutes, please? And could I have a proposer, Councillor Mumford, and seconder, Councillor Watt? All those in favour of the adoption of these minutes? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 3 on our agenda, Chairman's announcements. I just have one item under this. I have had a number of members and members of the community asking questions about some of the vacant duchy property on the islands in view of our housing crisis. And Natalie, the Deputy Land Steward for the Duchy of Cornwall, is with us this morning and is going to read out a short statement regarding that housing on behalf of the Duchy. This is not an opportunity for questions. It's a statement, and if you have issues or questions regarding this statement, then please refer them to the Duchy following this meeting or to our lead member for housing, Councillor Dean. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to have the opportunity to update members on the status of Duchy of Cornwall residential housing, particularly given the housing crisis on Scilly and the amount of residential property that the Duchy of Cornwall has on Scilly. In total, we've got 237 cottages on Scilly. In the last 6 months, we've relet 3 of these properties, 2 of which were because refurbishments have been completed, so the vacant properties were reoccupied, and 1 was suitable for immediate reletting. That's left 5 vacant dwellings, 3 of which currently have building works underway, and subject to contractors completing the works, we hope 2 of those will be ready for occupation in early 2023. The third is a very significant refurbishment where we've been unable to find contractors to take on the job, so we've been rescoping the project and finding other ways to deliver the works. The remaining 2 vacant dwellings are currently being specified for building works, and both have significant infrastructure issues. 1 has no potable water supply and 1 has non-compliant foul drainage. So we're working with other agencies and experts to find solutions, but that inevitably takes longer for them to be occupied. As I'm sure members are aware, and like other housing providers on Scilly, the Duchy of Cornwall faces significant challenges in procuring and delivering building works on Scilly. Contractor availability is very limited both on Scilly and the mainland, and we're trying new models to ease it and deliver works here. Meeting regulatory compliance standards, particularly for the older property on Scilly, is a big challenge, and that covers health and safety, infrastructure and environmental compliance. The Duchy of Cornwall has also had its own staffing challenges, which has hampered our delivery, but we've been recruiting to the team to support the delivery of our work on Scilly. As we overcome these challenges, we're also working to provide additional residential units on Scilly. As you know, the Duchy of Cornwall provided the Enna Farm site at Old Town for 12 affordable self-build plots. We're in the process of selling the Seaview site at McFarland's Down for a further 3 self-build plots, 2 of which are Section 106 occupancy restricted. And we're also scoping and feasibility stages for other sites to provide further residential housing, particularly the Con Thomas Primary School site, where we're in discussions with architects as to what can be delivered there. We're looking at various barn conversions for additional units in existing buildings, and we're exploring building techniques which we hope will help speed up the construction of new dwellings on Scilly and help with the lack of residential housing here.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie. So we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5 on our agenda is to consider reports from committees, including receipt of draft minutes. We have one scrutiny committee. Councillor Mumford, would you like to comment on that, please?
I propose that we accept these minutes. I imagine everybody's read them.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Mumford? No, thank you very much. So item 6 on our agenda is consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 7, urgent items. I have none. So we move on to part 1, agenda item 8, which is the first of our planning applications, the Storm Cottage, in the hands of Lisa Walkmar, Lead Officer for Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So this application is property Storm Cottage at Little Porth. The application is brought to members as the proposal will result in the net gain of one additional unit of residential accommodation. The proposal has been submitted as a result of an enforcement investigation into the use of a Section 106 restricted property and an approved extension. As set out in the report, the original dwelling has been extended into the attached garage, but the extension as constructed does not accord with the approved plans and has resulted in the self-contained unit of accommodation that has been used as a unit of holiday-let accommodation. This conflicts with both the approved plans and the local plan. The applicant has now submitted an application to regularise the self-contained accommodation and has agreed to a modification of the Section 106 that already covers the property. No further extensions or external alterations are proposed, and the application would result in 2 one-bedroom units of accommodation that can only be occupied by qualifying persons. Subject to the prior completion of the modified Section 106 and the conditions set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Marcus.
Thanks, Lisa. I think it's the best outcome we could have wanted as a result of some enforcement action. Are the properties linked, i.e. can they be separated and sold separately?
I don't know if they are linked and that they're integral to one another. And when I visited, there was a door linking one to the other. Whether or not that's been closed up to create self-containment, I don't know, but it would have to comply with the building regulations.
Okay, so, in terms of selling the properties, is there anything we can do with planning, or would it be worthwhile? Or does it even matter?
I don't know if you could sell them separately. They are obviously one property that has been split. They would be covered by a single Section 106, so that would have to be modified to different owners if they were to sell one. But we wouldn't be in a position where we would want to lift the 106.
Mm-hmm. As long as it has to come back to us.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got no questions, and I'm happy with the proposed recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
It's just a query really, please, Lisa. It states that the applicant seeks to regularise the self-contained accommodation they have created. This has been advertised as accommodation as a self-catering holiday let for the 2022 season, and again I notice it's advertised as a holiday let for the 2023 season. Is there any intention to comply with the 106 if passed? Do you know? They would have to comply with 106, and if it came to our attention that they had continued to use it as a holiday let, then we would have to write to them and ask them to stop using it as a holiday let, and if they didn't, take enforcement action.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
So that enforcement action, we are finishing a procurement exercise for enforcement. Is that correct, Lisa? Just to make the applicant aware that this is actually happening.
Yes, so we currently have limited resources to tackle enforcement. Enforcement's a discretionary part of planning, but we have an enforcement services project where we are about to appoint an external consultant to carry out some planning enforcement where these relate to the housing crisis issues.
Okay, and this sort of action would be something that is definitely on their radar?
Yes, that would be, we would add it to the list if there was a continued breach. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a general point following on from this, that islanders can have help and advice from our planning department at any time should they feel that they need it. It is said that an Englishman's home is his castle, but I think we should remember, according to our particular situation, that if a home is altered to create a separate living space, then as this report notes, planning permission will be needed. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a proposer, Councillor Marcus, for granting of this application. Councillor Dean?
Yeah, I'm happy to second it. Just, yeah, I mean, we have to take it at face value, and it creates a new local accommodation. So I think it's, generally a good thing. It's a shame we had to do the enforcement, but anyway, yeah, happy to second the proposal.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour of granting of the application, please. That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 9 on our agenda is the second of our planning applications around Holgates Green. Also in your hands, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is brought to members as the land on which the application relates is council-owned and maintained green space. I just wanted to make a couple of corrections to the report. Firstly, paragraph 7 refers to the council's licensing committee issuing a street trading licence, which should read the council's licensing department. Paragraph 40 states that the activities have not been subject to formal noise complaints, and this was my understanding at the time the report was drafted, following discussions with the council's environmental health officers. A further representation has suggested that this is not the case, as they have formally complained about the noise activities, specifically the generator. I've clarified with the environmental health team, and they have confirmed that it's the evidence forms which are used to record in evidence instances of noise nuisance that have not been submitted in relation to the noise of the proposed use. So the proposal is not for operational development, but is for a material change of use specific to the street trading activities and vehicles proposed. As I hope is clear in the report, not all street trading activities require planning permission, and it is the level of use, the number of vehicles and the regularity of the use that have in this instance brought officers to the conclusion that this does require planning permission. Activities by the applicant have already taken place, but not to the level proposed in this application, and it's my view that the activities to date have not resulted in a breach of planning or trigger the need for a change of use of land. The activities specifically to the level proposed, however, which is trading on the green for 6 days a week, 2 hours at lunchtime, 3 hours in the evening, comprising 2 specific vehicles, one cooking and serving food, the other housing a generator, have not yet taken place at the site. The report has considered the proposal principally under policy SS4, which we'll note seeks to protect recreational spaces, including Holgates Green, from harm or loss to their recreational purpose. This assessment concludes that the use does not result in a loss of the space, and whilst there will be some impact upon use when the vehicles are on the green, this does not prevent other activities from taking place or impact on the council's ability to continue renting the space or for other users of the public to use it informally. Members are reminded that the council's environmental health officers have powers to address problems associated with statutory noise nuisance, and the licensing department has the power to revoke a licence where trading activities fail to comply with street trading policy. In terms of the impact upon amenity for the purposes of assessing planning merits, then the report concludes that this will be located in a town centre where commercial activities already take place, including a high level of use of the green itself. And on this basis, I have not considered the proposed use to be out of keeping with this area. Although I have recommended the permission to be temporary in nature, if members find the use acceptable sufficient to grant planning permission, I am aware that there is a requirement to renew a street trading licence annually, and it would be for the council under its other regulatory powers to monitor and determine if street trading of this nature continues to comply with the street trading policy of the council. From a planning perspective, given the need to understand the longer-term impacts once trading to the level proposed commences, I think it is reasonable to make this permission temporary. Based on the submitted details, observations of the activities that have taken place, I do not consider the proposal would result in the loss of the recreational use of Holgate Green. The council retain ownership and control of the space and recognise that it serves a useful community purpose for events, which will not change as a result of this application. I therefore haven't assessed the proposal in relation to the policy tests as set out in Policy SS4, specifically A, B, C or D of Part 3. On the basis that the green will continue to be used for community events and activities, the council is not seeking to dispose of Holgate Green and permit development that would see it irreversibly lost. As decision makers in this case, you need to consider and weigh in the balance the competing issues of protecting the recreational space and general amenity of the area versus the proposed commercial activity. Should members consider greater weight should be given to the protection of Holgate Green and find that it would result in sufficient harm as to prejudice other activities from taking place on it, or sufficiently harm general amenity or neighbouring amenity, then I would ask that this reason is clearly stated if an alternative recommendation to refuse is proposed. But based on the proposed use of Holgate Green, the report has concluded that it does not conflict with the policies of the local plan, but in the interest of the long-term management of the site, the permission is recommended for a temporary period only. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Marcus?
So first, I want to acknowledge the overwhelming public response. It's great that the public feel that their opinion counts, and I can assure the public that officers and members both have read the comments and discussed the comments extensively. This application has caused a level of interest that's quite rare for the islands. So Lisa, just one question to start with. One of the points that was brought up in the comments was about community events and how, if this was passed, how that would affect community events. What you said in your intro is that community events would take precedent over the citing of this ban?
Yes, so my understanding is when a street trader has been issued a street trading licence and it is for somewhere like Holgate Green, they are not permitted unless they agree with the event organiser to use the site. So the person who has booked the event takes precedent over a street trader. So and that will continue to be the case if this application is passed.
Right. Okay. So I would remind members that we have to focus on what the applicant has applied for, namely the sighting of vehicles for 9 hours a day, 6 days a week on Holgate Green, with 5 of those hours seeing the business in operation. This application is not a discussion about street trading policy or how this situation came to pass. It's also worth noting that currently, with policy as it stands, as I understand it, street trading is allowed on Holgate Green regardless of the outcome of this application. Is that correct?
Yes. So if it's a level of use that doesn't trigger the need for planning permission, then yes, a street trader who has obtained a street trading licence and they have checked the planning, then they would be allowed to trade on Holgate Green.
Okay. So I would urge the public to be as vociferous and forthcoming when the upcoming consultation that occurs on street trading is outlined later in this agenda. I would hope members keep focused on the planning issues in hand and not get distracted by other peripheral issues which may speak to wider policy context but are not material planning concerns to this application. So in my consideration, I'm basing my judgment of this application is summed up in paragraph 28. Namely, does the application cause substantial harm or just harm to the conservation area? If the application does cause harm, can this be weighed against the public benefits of the application? So for me, there is a judgment to be made about perceived harm of the sighting of the vehicles for 9 hours a day on land that has been designated as a recreation area. I found this really difficult, so what I've decided, how I've judged it, is to go for the maximum hours that the applicant has gone for. So for me, it's a judgment on what it would be like for the vehicles to be there 6 hours, 9 hours a day, 6 days a week. So reading the evidence, yes, it seems like there's an anecdotal shortage of eating venues, but this is anecdotal, not empirical. Do the proposed vehicles change the usage of the designated recreation area? In my opinion, with only 2 vehicles, not really. Do the vehicles cause a change in amenity, which for me is defined as noise, smell and visual change? This is where I find myself being stuck. The application is for 6 days a week, with the vehicles being there 9 hours a day. This level of trading, I feel, would not be a good fit for the area. I feel with this level of activity that there will be harm to the conservation area and would have an impact on the amenity of the area. I have to stress that, in my opinion, it's the level of usage that leads me to lean towards refusal of this application. But at this point, I'd like to throw the floor open to other members.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Lisa. Holgates Green is a conservation area and located in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Therefore, any development should preserve or enhance the character of the appearance of that area. The application is a material change of how Holgates Green is to be used, and I believe it is irrelevant that a mobile catering unit will probably only occupy 20% of the green for 9 hours a day. The whole area of Holgates Green is an area of outstanding natural beauty, not 80% of it or a part of it, and the Council of the Isles of Scilly have a statutory duty to have regard to conserving and enhancing its natural beauty. The urban survey that the Council of the Isles of Scilly undertook referred to the important visual gateway Holgates Green provided to Hewtown, especially for arrivals by the sea, and recommend maintaining and enhancing this public realm. I question how the application maintained and enhances the public realm. Twice a day, 6 days a week, the mobile catering unit and Land Rover access to Holgates Green disrupts the normal flow of traffic and parking on Lower Strand. It could be viewed as a minor traffic inconvenience. However, what happens if the ambulance needs to use the road to respond to a 999 life-threatening emergency when the mobile catering van and Land Rover are undertaking their manoeuvres? Is it to reverse and take another route or wait? Someone has a cardiac arrest, you only have 3 minutes to restart someone's heart before irreversible brain damage starts to occur. The Land Rover and mobile unit mount the pavement and curb at Holgates Green and drive over the grass site to the unit. And I am concerned that to allow access, as stated in the report, is a wait-and-see approach and not demonstrating due regard for people's safe use of this area. Smells and fumes. During the site visit, there was a brisk northwesterly breeze, and you could smell the food odours emanating from the mobile van. This is probably to be expected. Noise. I believe the environmental team undertook a noise check on site and by the Roman Catholic Church. However, no noise checks have been undertaken to my knowledge at those buildings closer to the proposed site. Environmental concerns. The Council of the Isles of Scilly have declared a climate emergency and made a commitment to reduce the island's carbon footprint. The mobile catering unit is relying on a fossil fuel power generator and does little to meet the Council of the Isles of Scilly's carbon reduction commitment on their land and reduce the carbon footprint. Therefore, in conclusion, in my view, the proposed change of Holgates Green to accommodate a mobile catering unit and ancillary power source does not enhance the public realm and alters the pattern of development in this area. The benefits of public, in my view, interest do not outweigh the drawbacks, and I cannot, on all conscience, vote for the approval.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It would be putting the cart before the horse if, before we had the consultation on this issue, we went ahead and made a decision on this matter today. Down the years, Holgate Green has undergone many changes. It became an open space after the hotel was knocked down. That space was intended for council housing, which never happened. However, the intention is still of key relevance today. Example, that it is a social asset for the community. It is viewed as one of the very few open grass spaces in a built-up area of town, with unparalleled views of the harbour and off-island. It is therefore of value in its own right. The classification of the green is that of recreation area. I ask you, just how vague and wishy-washy is that term? It's all things to all people, open to a range of confusing interpretations. Football is recreation, tennis, rounders, barbecues, etc. It's easy and not altogether fair, I admit, to cherry-pick bits from the local plan to suit an argument. But the following words struck me forcibly, that members are obliged to ensure the character and appearance of the conservation area is either preserved or enhanced as a result of use. Does a fixed takeaway, however well conducted, as I'm sure it will be, enhance? To my mind, it would not enhance a valuable environmental resource. Indeed, it could be harmful. I would like to propose refusal on this agenda item.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Councillor Williams, please.
It's a question for Lisa, just so I can be 100% clear in my own mind. We could refuse planning permission this morning, but the applicant could still legally and legitimately trade, but for less hours. Is that correct?
For those hours?
They could just trade for fewer hours?
Oh, yes. So there is no hard and fast rule about what does need planning permission, because it depends on the scale of the operations, the size of the structures, the noise, the odours, the type of use. So you could never say this use needs planning permission, whereas something else doesn't. It really does depend on each nature of each business who are street trading. I think you could get away with fewer days, fewer hours without triggering a change of use of land. But because it comes with a Land Rover with a generator in it that has noise, you're at the smaller end of the operating hours before you trigger planning permission.
So
something that doesn't have a noisy generator could probably, and smaller scale, could get away with more hours without needing planning permission.
So whatever our decision today, the likelihood is there's going to be someone trading from that site. So
if they have a street trading licence, they could street trade, yes.
So I'm always looking for the win-win in life. We refuse it and we satisfy everyone who's objected, and the people who are in favour still get what they want.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Toyed with this one. Key things to me is temporary. That's correct. And it's temporary from March 23, or is it temporary from the decision today? But there's March 23 mentioned in the report.
Yes, so it has to end a year after March 2023. So it would they could continue now.
Temporary from today, and then from a date that trading starts. Okay, so it doesn't start trading from between today, if it's passed, and March 23. It can go on to March 24.
So if permission is granted today, they could trade for those hours. They have to cease a year after March 2023, because that's when they have stated in their application that they do want to trade for those hours. But I think it's highly unlikely that you would get this operator trading now, given it's the end of the season, for 6 hours a day. He intends to trade for those hours as of March next year, but there doesn't seem to be any point to say you can't start until March next year, if that makes sense.
I know we've discussed amongst members and yourself about electrical supply to Holgates Green, which would negate the use of a second vehicle, i.e. the Land Rover in this case, with a generator. Is that still a possibility?
Can I debate here, please, and just remind members to talk about the application rather than what is possible, possibilities, or future stuff? Let's just concentrate on the application and what's in front of us.
Okay, so for me the key things are temporary from March 23. The other item on the agenda, which is the street trading licence review, which in many ways is more important than the current planning application. On balance, with regards to eating out, I think it's important. I googled it this morning, and eating out comes in the top 5 recreational activities in this country consistently. So it's up there as one of the top recreational things that we do in this country, interesting enough. We do have, wherever we place our street trading, and from a visitor economy point of view, I think street trading is extremely important, as well as for the residential population, we're going to come up against these issues. So I feel this application does bring this situation firmly onto the agenda for the islands, and particularly for St Mary's, and will allow us to look at the street trading review with specific knowledge that Holgate's Green is a target for that. So on balance with the various intricacies in this, I would pass this application.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Councillor Guy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for being late. In agreement with Councillor Mumford, Councillor Bedford, and I'm in a similar situation to Councillor Williams, where no matter what we say or do today, it can carry on as is, which just puts me in an awkward situation. One question for the planning officer, playing devil's advocate. We get 40 people come over and they want to put mini barbecues on the grass and have a barbecue there every night of the week. What powers would stop this happening?
Ian, if you switch yours off.
Planning powers to stop people just having barbecues.
Would it create another issue for this council? That's what I'm trying to say.
That's not a planning issue. It potentially has environmental.
I'm sidetracking. I'm sorry there, but yeah, I'm agreeing with most members of what's been said.
Thank you, Councillor Sims, please.
Thank you. Now I watched this whole thing unfold. I must have seen trading down there 80 to 100 times, and I just didn't see any significant impact on the use of the green in any way, shape or form. They won't really be able to trade in any real effect until mid-late May, because the thing's going to be full of gigs, and I would say that all those gigs on the green is a much, much bigger hit on the amenity of Holgate than the van. But however, I am minded to refuse because I just think it's there for too long. I think that if it was there in the evening, and I know that some members of the public have issues with competition, which is not a consideration here, I don't think that the van would be there for 9 hours a day, irrespective of the planning permission. I think they would probably find that the trade is not that particularly strong during the day. But I would say that noise-wise, I can't hear it. Admittedly, my hearing's not what it was, but it's very, very low level. It didn't disturb the usage of the green. I mean, I think somebody mentioned ball games and things. You can't play ball games on them anyway. It's not a recreational activity in that sense. So I'm actually quite pro the applicant doing business, but I'm not pro the number of hours it's got. So I'm minded to refuse the permission.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Bearing in mind what Dan Marcus said earlier, I'd rather concentrate on planning rather than the licensing decision that was made, although I will say it was made originally in good faith. But I'll come to that as a later item on the agenda. I think it seems a complicated planning issue, this, but in actual fact, in essence, it's relatively straightforward. The crux of it is to consider whether the use, as proposed, will result in a loss of Holgate's Green as a recreational space or in any way prejudice its use. And the question I've got is how important or how much weight should we place on the interpretation of prejudice? And I note later in the report the definition of harm, the conclusion was that this is less than substantial harm. But is this a bit too subjective?
I can come back on that.
Thank you, Lisa.
So how much weight you give to that is you as the decision makers, how much weight you give to the prejudicial impact that you see. The definition of harm relates to harm of a designated heritage asset. So as a conservation area, that's the national assessment, the National Planning Policy Framework's definition of harm as you're assessing the impact on a designated heritage asset. And it comes into this as it's in a conservation area.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Grottek.
Thank you, Chair. I have genuinely tried to come to this meeting with an open mind, and I've listened very carefully to colleagues. And I wonder if it might be wise to amend the application to suggest that the lunchtime trading would in fact impact and create some of the issues that we have discussed, whereas the evening, that I think the balance in the evening might change. So I would be looking for advice from the lead member for planning and the planning officer as to whether that might be a way forward.
For me, we judge the application in front of us. We don't try and make changes. We judge it and we move on. I don't know what Lisa would say about that.
You could seek, I'm not recommending this because deferring a planning application opens up a potential appeal challenge for non-determination. But if you wanted to defer the decision in order to go back to allow me to negotiate with the applicant about whether or not they wanted to amend the hours on which they would trade, then that you can defer it. It does introduce a potential appeal risk.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, for me, I think I mainly agree with Councillor Sims, actually, but it's the scale of the use that's the issue for me. I've already asked this question, Lisa, and I apologise for asking it again. The application is for 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, but you stated earlier that the use that's being used at the moment doesn't need planning permission. Where is the line?
I don't have an answer. In the course of it's whether or not it triggers a material change of use, and someone there for those hours, in my view, does. It really is a judgment as to whether or not he occasionally comes there and trades. I don't believe that is a material change of use. But if he's saying I'm there just in the evenings for 5 days a week, that's a judgment call as to whether that's a material change of use of land. I don't know where that line is, and I think it's at the smaller end because he has an external generator as a means of power supply. I think if he just towed the catering wagon onto the green and it has an energy supply, I think you could get away with not needing planning permission for longer, to trade longer.
Going back to Dan's point about keeping this application, I think for me, 6 days a week, 9 hours a day is too much. So I think I'd be minded to recommend refusal as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
Yes, I've made a proposition for refusal. I'd just like to emphasise the reasons I have for that would be a conservation area. And in my opinion, it does not enhance and it needs to be preserved. I think refusal is the right way to go. We do have a consultation coming up about Holgate Green, and I'm sure another application will probably come in after that, depending on what the results of the consultation are about Holgate Green. I'd like to make that proposal again.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Councillor Williams.
I'm concerned that refusal doesn't clear up the issue. If we refuse it, we're still left with a position where the applicant will be on the site, but we're not sure, sat here today, how often he's going to be on the site for.
But that's not a planning consideration.
But by going down Lisa's route of deferral and having those negotiations may allow us to sit here with a much clearer knowledge.
Licensing policy says that they can trade on Holgates Green. But this application is for trading for 6 days a week, 9 hours a day. That's what we're judging here at this application. What you're talking about is street trading policy. I think that is something else for another part of this.
Okay.
And Lisa's point is that given where we are in the season and the timings, then hardly any street trading is going to happen anyway.
But my point is, he will still be trading it they will still be trading for some of the day, but we don't know when and for how long.
And my point is that he's allowed that as part of the street trading policy that we have allowed the council previously. Regardless of this planning application, of any planning application, street-based trading policy trumps what we can do here with planning.
It's not a very satisfactory resolution, is it?
No, but we are where we are.
Thank you. Lisa, could I just, from the chair, check something with you? Do I understand correctly that they have finished trading for this year now?
Yes, that's my understanding as well, that they have now come to the end. Their planning application, although it largely appears to be seasonal, because that's when most of their trading and their income will come from, they haven't applied for it to be on a seasonal basis because they would like to take advantage of allowing to trade to meet a local eating out need should it arise. So that's why they haven't gone specifically for a season to trade. So my understanding is they have now finished for the season. But I think, and I can't confirm when their street trading license runs until. I think it may run until next March. Yeah. So they could trade informally under the street trading license if they wish to, regardless of the outcome of this application.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But it appears that they have finished trading as such for this year. So I think we ought to look at that in light of Councillor Mumford's comments about the new street trading policy that is going to be looked at and consulted on ready for next spring. So that will obviously have a bearing on this. Could I just come to Officer Nicholas Stimson, please, now?
Yes, Chairman. I'd just like to invite Simon Mansell to comment on something that's occurred through this discussion, which is about how you would restrict the use under this planning permission. I'm just wondering, the proposal is set out in paragraph 6, which talks about trading between the hours of 12 and 2 and 5 and 8. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to put a condition on any approval that just restricts trading between 5 and 8, allowing the applicant to appeal against that condition if he felt that was unnecessary, was unacceptable, and that might be a way forward for members. I'm just not sure if that's possible, whether it's a reasonable condition or not, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, good morning, members. If I could come in on 2 points on it. First of all, with regards to the restrictions, it's up to members to consider whether it should go forwards with those restrictions placed or not. Though I think if members are minded to do that, it would be better and tidier to defer it with the risk that the applicant will go to appeal and negotiate with the applicant over the reduced hours and then bring it back to the next meeting. And I am aware of the street trading review, but what you cannot do is refuse the application on the premise that the street trading review may restrict trading on the green. That may not be the outcome of it, and you are doing it on something that hasn't happened yet. I'm happy to take further questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Councillor Sims.
I didn't mention it before, but the other issue with the van and the van railway going in there, I don't know if they're going to 11 till 2, it's going to be it will be a real traffic issue if they're trying to put it in there at that time of day. It's busy. It's absolutely not an issue when they're doing it around 5 o'clock. So I think that's honestly, take it from me, it would be a problem. I'm there all the time. So that's another reason I think that we should refuse the application.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to second Councillor Munford's proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have, Councillor Roger.
Yeah, maybe a little too late, but I'm just toying with the reduction in hours. I mean, it's very hard to tell a business that you can trade, but you can only trade for a certain amount of hours. That could make it unviable, fundamentally. And I think it'd be very hard for this council to pass a planning permission, but not allow someone to trade for the amount of hours they may need in order to make a business profitable. So I wouldn't be for that. And giving 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, I mean, most licenses have that, liquor licenses and everything, but very rarely do people actually trade for those hours. It gives them the window and the opportunity to open those hours should there be a big event on or something like that. But on a regular day-to-day basis, I very much doubt that that length of time would be taken up in its entirety. There's no guarantee to that, of course. But my main point was I think it's very dangerous to grant any application and reduce hours to such an extent that the business is not viable.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. So we have a proposal for refusal and a seconder for refusal. Lisa.
Sorry, can I just clarify the reasons for refusal that you're making? The recommendation. It's not about the loss of the recreation space. It's more the harm of this specific.
As a conservation area to be preserved or I just read out what it says.
Yeah.
Ensure the character and appearance of the conservation area is either preserved or enhanced as a result of use. I don't think it will enhance. And also, Councillor Sims brought up about the traffic. I think there will be problems with traffic.
So
it's the parking down there because he actually puts cones so people can't park when he was taking the Land Rover off. Am I right?
Are you clear now, Lisa?
Yes, I just don't have. Okay, no, that's fine. Does not really harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. We didn't get an objection from the Highways Department on highway safety. That's the only caution I've got about refusing it in terms of impact on highway safety. But members think it will be harmful to highway safety.
I think that there'll be quite a lot of occasions where he simply won't be able to get the thing in there, so he's going to be hanging around waiting for somebody to move, which is an issue. So I think it's going to be not necessarily safety. I don't think anybody's going to come to harm because of it, but it's going to cause an obstruction. There'll be problems there because some days he simply will not be able to get the van and the trailer in there, whereas that is definitely not going to be an issue, or very, very rarely would be an issue if he was doing it between 4 and 6.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Can I just go back to what Councillor Munford said? That's the reason that I have, I'm not going to support the application, is because I don't believe that the material change will enhance and maintain the public realm. Can I just go back to the point that Councillor Sims makes? It does take quite a bit of time for that mobile unit and catering unit to get onto the green. I've actually watched it. And you're an ambulance going down there. What is it meant to do? So I do think there's potential for traffic issues. Whether that's a planning consideration, I don't know. But my real reason that I don't want to support this is because it does not maintain and enhance the public realm of an area of outstanding natural beauty.
So the impact on highway safety is a material planning consideration.
I just wonder what an ambulance would do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marcus,
Sorry, I just want to make it clear for me, is this operation at this scale. So this doesn't preclude street trading on Holgate Green. Is this operation, this application.
Okay, thank you. Now, can I go back to the proposal, please, for refusal? And we have a seconder for refusal. But all those in favour of refusal, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. So, we'll move swiftly on, members. Item 10 on our agenda, that was a bit too swiftly. Item 10 is our statement of accounts and annual governance statement. And I'd like to hand over to our 151 officer, Russell Ashman. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I was hoping to be present in person today for this meeting because this is quite an important item, but the weather unfortunately beat me. But I'll just quickly take you through this report, and I've got the team that know the detail on hand. If you have any detailed questions, I will also at some point hand over to Paul Dossett from Grant Thornton with his comments on it. In summary, first of all, what is set out in front of you today is the statement of accounts for last financial year, 2021-22. That's set out in Appendix 1, and I'll get to those in a minute. The Council's annual governance statement is also attached. The Grant Thorntons, who are external auditors, audit findings report on those statements of accounts is set out in Appendix 3, and the letter of management representation is included in Appendix 4. Now, the statement of accounts, which I think we probably mentioned every time we bring the annual statement of accounts to you, are a complex set of documents. They're lengthy, some 80 pages. We have to produce them on a statutory basis to comply with statutory accounting regulations. They are probably not that meaningful to the untrained professional accountant. And in fact, even some professional accountants struggle with the depth of details that these go into. But we have to produce these in this format, so I cannot say that, give any excuses. If we had our say, we would produce a more simplified set of financial statements, but we cannot. Running quickly through the report in terms of the covering report, we've tried to pull out some of the key elements of the financial statements. And first of all, the comment that, again, we've made previously is you received the outturn report in June, which set out how much we spent last year, what we spent on revenue, what we spent on capital, and what our reserves were. They are deemed to be the management accounts. They're quite meaningful, but now they've been converted into the statutory accounts. We do try and pull together a reconciliation, but it's not an easy reconciliation. I think just in summary, you'll see that in the statement of accounts that overall on the bottom line, that the bottom line showed a £4.3 million increase in the total level of reserves, i.e. that is the bottom line of the income and expenditure statement. The vast majority of that 4.3 million is a movement in reserves, but it's in not the usable reserves, it's in the unusable reserves, and a lot of it equates to theoretical calculations on the pension scheme. The usable reserves have moved, and the prime mover is 633,000 increase in the general fund reserve, which now means that we're sat with a general fund balance as at the 31st of March of £3.1 million, which is a good, solid position to be in, particularly with the uncertainty that we are facing in the economy and the cost of living crisis and the potential impact that could have on council finances with high inflation over the next couple of years. In terms of the rest of the actual report itself, the main statement of accounts, which is set out and starts on, I think, page 113 of your pack. As I said, it's 80 pages. A lot of it is detailed statements of numbers, notes to the accounts. It takes a lot of time to read those and cross-reference and try to understand them. But the one bit that we would draw your attention to is if you read the narrative report in the first 15 pages, which is an attempt to summarise the Council's financial position, both looking backwards over last year and what its strategic financial plan is for the next 2 or 3 years. That's set out in the narrative report, and it's set out in such a way that is more meaningful and easy to understand for the non-trained accountant. So if people don't read anything else, read those first 15 pages. They are a good summary of where the Council's financial position is. I'm not going to go through those pages verbatim here. I'm probably just following those first few pages. There are then the main statement of accounts, which includes the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, the movement in reserves, and the Council's balance sheet. And as I say, at that point, from there on, it does get quite technical, and I'm not saying I'm precluding people from reading it, but I would suggest that at that point, it is a useful place to have at least read to there and understood it to that point. I think, in summary, we are in a strong financial position, as I've said before. I'll hand over to Paul Gossett in a minute, but I think you'll find that part of this approach is that we produce a statement of accounts through the technical team, through Tracy Leaney and Mike Harris, are both on the call to ask any detailed questions. We produce a statement of accounts which is a true, fair reflection of the Council's financial position. That is done by your officers and is your statutory accounts. We then have our external auditors from Grant Thornton come along and check that to ensure that they are correct. There are no material misstatements, and we're not being misled by inaccurate statements. So it's quite important that you listen to the external auditor, because in many ways that's where you get your assurance. You may not understand these statements in detail, but the external auditor does. They've done their work, and they will give you assurance that they are a true record and an accurate reflection of the Council's finances. Also included is the annual governance statement. Again, I won't go through that in detail. I take it that you've had time to read it. It's the same format, just updated from previous years to reflect the latest position. As we said previously, we've adopted the modern CIPFA pro forma approach to that. So it is consistent with many other councils up and down the realm. And after the audit findings report, which I'll leave to Paul, you'll find a letter of representation, which is the statutory sign-off of very much everything I've just said. We won't be able to sign that off immediately because there is still a national issue on local government accounts, which again Paul will cover. We're waiting for new legislation which will sort that out, but that's not likely to come for a few weeks yet. And until that new legislation is in place, the final formal sign-off of the accounts cannot actually happen. At that point, I'll stop and take any questions before I hand over to Paul on the audit's finding report.
Thank you, Russell. Are there any questions for Russell at this stage, please? Councillor Grottig.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether to comment now or to wait for Mr. Dossett, but perhaps a quick comment now might be appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Dossett and Mr. Ashman, for all your work together with your teams on our behalf. It's very pleasing to receive such a positive set of accounts. But however, just to note that members accept, as the Section 151 officer has counselled us, that the road ahead will be more challenging. However, we also are grateful for the fact that we have a very sound financial structure to assist us in this. So thank you both and your teams again.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Russell. I just wish you'd said you could only read the first 15 pages first before after reading the whole reading lot. However, I did actually email you a few questions, and thank you for asking them. Can you just clarify for everyone that's here about the national insurance increase? I do believe that is now being scrapped by our present government system.
Yeah, well, as we stand as of today, the recommendation from the mini budget or the fiscal event a few weeks ago is that will be scrapped as of, I think it is the 3rd or 4th of November or something like that. So yes, that pressure, which we have had to meet this year, will come away a little bit. for this year, so we may get a little bit of upside in the current year. It does not have any impact on the statement of accounts in front of you, because these are historic in the year that those increases were not relevant. But yes, it has been scrapped at the moment. We shall see whether that stands following the 31st of October's announcement by the Chancellor. But what I would say is that people think that it's going to give us a financial benefit next year. There is a small possibility, but the government did increase our funding settlement last year to allow for it, and we would be expecting the funding settlement to be reduced accordingly. So, good news for the current year, probably not as good news for next year.
Thank you, Russell. As the ladies opt for turn-in, we'll have to wait and see to October the 31st.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd now like to welcome Paul Dossett from our auditors, Grant Thornton. And so I'll hand over to you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good morning, members, and apologies for me as well that I couldn't make it in person. Was intending to, but obviously the weather defeated me. Three main points before going into a bit of detail. First of all, I just want to draw out the point that Russell made about reserve position. Our general view is that local government has some very rocky days ahead for all the reasons that Russell set out. So the fact you've strengthened your reserve position is a real positive. Secondly, I think it's fair to say our assessment of local government finance functions and the ability to produce good quality accounts is coming under severe pressure. And so we're seeing increasingly late accounts and we're seeing increasingly error-strewn accounts. And it's really important to point out that you produced a good quality set of accounts here, so credit to your team for doing that. The third issue is about infrastructure assets to which Russell referred, and this was an issue identified in the early part of 2022 that local authorities were not complying with the detail of SIFRA's requirements on accounting for infrastructure assets, which are sort of coastal defences and roads and various other things like that. There's been a big investigation by SIFRA and all sorts of other people, and government have come up with a temporary solution of a statutory override, which effectively, a statutory override is essentially saying, never mind what accountant says or what the SIFRA code says, this is what we're saying the number is. So it defines the number. So that statutory override is likely to say the numbers in the accounts for infrastructure assets are correct, regardless of whether they're fully compliant with the code. That's what it's likely to say. Our understanding is that statutory override obviously has to go through Parliament. There's obviously a busy parliamentary programme, and our understanding is that will not come to pass until the end of November. And the statutory instruments, when they come in, have a further period where once they're passed into Parliament, they don't come into effect on day one. There's another 3 or 4 week period, bizarrely, that it takes to actually come into play. So we're going to be towards the very end of the year, and obviously the Ulster City has significant infrastructure assets. So that means in reality this audit is not going to be signed off until either late 2022 or possibly even early 2023, but that will be in common with all other audits. In terms of the detail, probably just want to take you to page 225 of your pack. As I said, overall good quality accounts, really pleased with all of that. A few things that we need to close out apart from infrastructure assets, and we have a list there, bullet points, about eight or so bullet points. Most of that is now done. We're still having a sort of discussion with the valuer about discount values applied, which have been applied equally to Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, but I don't anticipate that being in any way problematic. And we've completed all of our sort of work on the broader significant risks in terms of management override and control, which is about journals, which is sort of set out on page 229. That's all done, no issues there. valuation of land and buildings, and apart from that issue about discount factor, that's all done. No significant issues there. Pension fund liability, again, all good stuff, all done. So no concerns, and we've looked at the way that the council does its estimates, which are sort of set out from 232 onwards, and again, happy with the approach on all of that. So overall, really, really positive sort of bill of health, I think, to be honest. Really pleased with the way things have gone. And if we weren't delayed by this infrastructure assets issue, we would be signing the set of accounts off pretty quickly. But sadly, we are at the moment. But overall, I'd actually say, building on the last couple of years, the position is actually getting stronger in terms of the quality that we're seeing of the accounts. I'd like to thank officers for that. Happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you very much, Paul. I don't see any hands up at the moment. I think, Chief Executive, Paul, would you like to come in at this stage?
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. Well, a couple of things from me, just broadly speaking. One is to thank not just the finance team and the external auditors, but actually behind all of this, of course, every member of the council plays their part in making sure that we manage our finances properly. So I think it's a big well done to everybody that we do keep our eye on the things that matter in this council. The bit I was also wanted members, which they may have missed, is on the internal audit report, which is where there was, reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance from an internal auditor, again, is a pretty good endorsement of the way that your council is run from a governance, performance, risk, finance point of view. And I was also really heartened, and big thank you again to all staff and all managers, that we have achieved 85% of internal audit management actions concluded. That's a very high percentage compared to many other authorities that I also do peer reviews on. So we do take internal audit recommendations seriously, and we do try to seek to make sure that we action those as well. So a good council can only be built on good internal processes, and so I just wanted, Chairman, to say thank you to everybody who makes sure that we do keep an eye on those things that matter behind the scenes.
Thank you very much, Paul. Councillor Sims, please.
Yes, thank you for the reports. I'd like to say they were very clear, but I read until I could no longer function. But looking at the executive summaries and everything, I'm just really heartened by the direction of travel, and I've been heartened by the direction of travel for a number of years now, but we seem to be getting to a place we want to be, so that's really good. Anyway, thank you for the reports and the enormous amount of work that must have gone into them. I'm just glad I don't have to compile the things.
Thank you very much. So we have some recommendations to deal with, please. Before I do that, Councillor Grottek.
I'm just going to propose the recommendations, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are 4 recommendations in front of you, proposed by Councillor Grottek, seconded by Councillor Sims. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much, Paul, for your attendance, Paul Dossett, and thank you very much, Russell, for all your work, and as I'd like to endorse Chief Executive's comments about how well our staff have managed these accounts. So thank you very much indeed, everyone involved. Thank you. So we move on now to item 11 on the agenda, which is our pay policy statement, and that's in the hands of Tina. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chairman. So this year's pay policy statement has been reviewed and general amendments made to clarify the pay multiple position, update locally determined standby rates of pay, amend overtime requirements to allow for payment in exceptional circumstances, giving the council greater flexibility. The council is still awaiting the nationally agreed rates of pay due to a failure at this stage from the trade unions and employers' side to reach agreement. and further development is awaited.
Excuse me, Tina, could you speak up a little bit, please? We can't hear you very well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me? Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So the recommendations for this agenda item are as follows. Members are asked to endorse the proposed amendments to the pay policy statement for the period 2022-2023. Members are asked to note the increase to locally determined standby rates of pay, which have been reviewed and uplifted in consultation with the Chief Executive, Section 151 Officer and Strategic Directors, and that members approve delegated authority to the Section 151 Officer to update the rates of pay or the pay scales once agreement has been reached on the pay award between the trade unions and the employer's side. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any lights on, so could somebody please make a proposal for these three recommendations? Councillor Marcus and seconded Councillor Legg. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you, Tina, for your report. We move on now to item 12 on our agenda, which is the financial regulations update, also in the hands of our 151 Officer Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what we're bringing you today is an update in the Council's financial regulations. The Council's financial regulations is one of the key documents that helps set the governance framework for the Council and how it behaves in terms of its financial management and its financial responsibilities. When I first got involved in the Council, when it was had issues following the Section 24 notice back 4, 5, 6 years ago, one of the first jobs that I did was bring you a updated set of financial regulations at that time. We deemed them to be interim because they were already updated and they were quite an old format, and some of them were probably not best suited for a more modern local authority. They've been in that format for a number of years. At that point, I did say we would bring back a complete fresh look at financial regulations within the next couple of years. Obviously, that has drifted a little bit, mainly because I was seeing it have a 2-year pandemic at that point. But here we are today with a new set of financial regulations in a more modern-looking format. I take no, I'm not going to hide behind. We have borrowed the format used by Cornwall Council, which is based on work that they had done by SIPCA. So we are using what is deemed to be national best practice in terms of the format. So I think that can only be a good thing. The details are there. I know that I have had these circulated to members for some time now because I know they are detailed and we don't expect you to be able to go through these in a meeting such as this. Therefore, I take that people have gone through, they've raised any questions or areas they wanted to by now, and they're now set out in front of you for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Russell. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously a very complex document, as indeed, as Russell has mentioned, so are all the finance papers. But I think it's just worth commenting for the record in the minutes that following the last full council, the 151 officer held a workshop which was very well attended by members. It's obviously necessary to fulfil all our statutory obligations in this field, and members appreciated the opportunity to ask some questions then and have a full briefing before this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, just note paragraph 2.7 about bringing the regulations back for review at the Governance Committee. Can we just make sure that we work with audit to make sure that any issues with the regulations we can get through quickly and streamlined in some way in the future? But with that, I propose the recommendations.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sims. All those in favour of this update? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Russell, for all your work with this again.
So, item 13 on our agenda is the street trading review update in the hands of our director, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Short but important report because it sets us out on our new journey in looking at a review of our street trading policy. So we've had a street trading policy since 2013. It was reviewed in January, and at that review, they wanted to the licensing committee wanted us to consider in November at the latest any feedback we'd had on those changes that were introduced earlier in this year. So I think we've had a fair bit of feedback. We need to learn from that. We need to look at what that new policy might look like. But to inform that, we need to consult effectively. So you'll see in the table at paragraph 7 of this report, a proposal to start a consultation process that would conclude in February with the licensing committee reviewing an updated policy. So the first element of that will be on the 28th of October. It's starting with a member informal session workshop on a consultation process in terms of what we've learnt so far, what the feedback's been so far, and what the questions we should be asking in terms of this review when we go out to the public and stakeholders that follows that member workshop October through to January. When we've got that feedback, we need to evaluate it, and then we need to make sure that the key stakeholders that are involved in the process are also reconsulted on that revised policy as well. Which would give us time in January to write a report for February's council with an updated policy that hopefully sets out any changes that will be proposed and any lessons learned from the process that's been undertaken so far. So it's a short report and a short recommendation, but a really important part of the journey because effective engagement and consultation will mean we'll have the right policy in place by next February. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thanks for Nicola for fronting this report, although it was actually written by Mike Coates. Could I just say at the beginning that I mentioned before at some of the informal meetings, this is not the actual review, but this report is to approve the start of the process of the review. And could I also add in stakeholders to the in the paragraph 7 in the matrix, you can see there October 22 public consultation, 8 weeks, self-completion survey includes stakeholders with that one. Going back to the original decision in January this year, it was made in good faith. There were 9 councillors in attendance from memory, and it was unanimously approved. However, I've got to say that I felt in common with a couple of other members I've spoken about this, the report that accompanied the policy change was not brilliant. To be fair, it was quite thin actually as a report. Secondly, there was no indication in that report of any planning issues, which we've come across this morning. There was no indication in there at all of planning issues if we approved that policy. And thirdly, I think the other flaw was consultation. Consultation was interpreted within the policy as premises, consultation of premises, and that was believed to be just business premises. But I think that should be expanded to include all nearby residents or anybody who's concerned about it, actually. So I think the 3 things which I thought were not right with the original report that we looked at in January and approved in good faith. I've got to say this, and as one of the phrases that the Vice Chairman often uses, there have been unintended consequences. I think that's a good way of summing it up, really. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watt. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you. This query about the consultation, please, Nicola. I just wondered, how do we include the visitors? Because they've got an interest in street trading, and as the consultation is going to be done over the winter, it's our low season.
Ewan will correct me if I'm wrong here, but the visitor survey that's undertaken each year asks about the visitor offer, and that's what the intention was to draw upon the Islands Partnership's feedback from the visitor survey. That's you, is it?
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Do I have a Sorry, Councillor Sim.
Yes, I'm happy to propose it. I would just ask that we make sure that, I'm not sure it will be, that this is publicised properly so that people can't come back and say, well, we didn't know anything about this, when in fact they did or they should have done.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder for us to start this consultation process. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the report, Nicola. Item 14 on our agenda, the Smart Islands Programme Closure Report, which is in the hands of our Head of Asset Management Development, Jim Wrigley. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, and thank you, members. The Smart Islands Programme Closure Report sits in tandem with the report that is coming after that, which looks at the legacy business case of the assets. We've specifically separated the papers out so that the issues can be dealt with in isolation. So this paper that we're looking at now relates to the programme and is distinct from any assets that have resulted from that programme. What I've aimed to do in the paper is to provide a brief update of each of the projects that within that programme, the projects, whether they've been successful, whether they're opened or closed, whether they're ongoing, and a summary is provided of what assets have resulted from the Smart Islands programme as a whole. We've also taken a look at the aims of the programme and what progress has been achieved against each of these aims that were set out a number of years ago. And in that, we've also addressed the lessons learned from the programme, which I'm keen to point out are now being implemented in the work that we are doing going forwards on other projects. Given that the projects in the programme are either closed or reaching closure, and that the Council now has a climate change action plan, which in effect now supersedes what Smart Islands was trying to do, the Council recommends, the report recommends that the Council now removes itself as a signatory from the Memorandum of Understanding of the Smart Islands Partnership. The report recognises, though, that the Council is just a member of the Smart Islands Partnership and there are other members, so it's not in its power to close the programme as such. But the report recommends that the Council now goes forward to the Smart Islands Partnership and those other members to recommend that now that the programme has been superseded by other action plans, that the programme is now closed.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the fullness of time, I'm very happy to recommend the recommendations in this closure report, but I would like to make, if I may, just a couple of comments. Firstly, I fully endorse the analysis and comments on page 402, but would just like to make a few additional points. I think it's worth noting and remembering that all who were involved in the programme, both at the outset and in the duration of the programme, had the best interests of the island and the residents as the aim. Indeed, if we had all had the expected reductions in our electricity bills, I think we would all be really, really pleased. Close monitoring of the partners within the Memorandum of the Understanding was obviously key. And I would just say that if a delivery partner such as Hitachi, in receipt of large sums of public money especially, states in a Memorandum of Understanding that educational support will be given to our school, then they should deliver that. I should say that I haven't asked the school, and it may be that they were offered more support that they couldn't, for whatever reason, take up. But it's disappointing that some of those very aspirational offers about internship and language support, for example, weren't actually carried through. So the fact that the report mentions monitoring is, I think, important. Our officers, however, recognise this, and we now have additional project management support for our ambitious capital programme going forward. So it's a bit of a retrospective comment in that way. In our small unitary authority, I would just say, though, that I would focus on officer time as well. Officer time is precious, and I think one of the key challenges of Smart Islands was that the balance between the work on a very innovative and exciting project didn't perhaps balance properly, or in some areas, with the need for emphasis on what I might call the so-called housekeeping at home, such as working towards the financial stability that we now have, and other challenging issues such as the care of our corporate estate and our social housing, which inevitably was a challenge that took some time to actually pick up and focus on. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to recommend the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Legg. Yes, I'd just like to, second the recommendation, but also to say that the lessons that were learned from the project were probably too numerous to mention. I think we'd be here all day. It was such a long project, and I'd like to point out some of the really good aspects, such as the partnership working that we carried out, and that we featured in the government's industrial strategy. Because of this, it was a really good project, but it was incredibly ambitious and innovative. So the fact that not everything came to fruition isn't necessarily a failure. On the subject of lessons learned, it mentions about the allocation of resource and the importance of including financing the officer time involved. Would you say that was true across the board, or did we perhaps finance the sort of strategic level officer support and less of the administrative officer support?
I'll answer that. I think there was an unequal burden placed on the council in terms of the Smart Islands partnership, and that the partners didn't necessarily contribute as we would have expected. So the leadership fell upon the council, as did the secretariat, and that was then shared with the community venture. And I think there wasn't a buy-in across the whole partnership about the need to support the secretariat and the day-to-day running of a programme of that nature. I think that's a fair reflection.
Thank you. That's something that we should consider in other projects going forwards then. With that, I'll second the recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Legg. Councillor Watt, please. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry to sound a bit like a nerd, but the paragraph about innovation projects, some failure can be expected, and is in fact part of the innovation process. It reminded me of a quotation from Samuel Beckett, if you fail, try again and fail better.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watt, for those words of wisdom. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Jim. The Smart Island project was agreed by full council in May 2015, and it came with great expectations and aspirations. I didn't become a councillor until 2021, and it's very difficult for me to add anything to the debate. And I know I usually dissect every point, don't I? But I don't think on this occasion it would be very helpful. And Jim very kindly phoned me, and we had a long conversation about the Smart Island project. However, I do have a couple of observations. I was a resident of St Mary's during the era that the Smart Island project came about, and if I recall correctly, there was very little engagement with the project with the islanders, and there was a very little sense of ownership. I don't think we have, as residents, we felt we had the ownership of the project. The report uses actually words like disengagement, where renewable energy resources are installed in local authority houses, and there was ongoing dissatisfaction, which I actually find a bit concerning. There are Smart Island projects all around the world, and it's interesting to make comparisons with an experience of other global offshore communities. Each offshore community is different, with access to a range of renewable resources, and some have become self-sufficient in their energy usage. It seems to me that the communities that were most successful with these projects adopted a bottom-up approach with greater involvement with their local population, undertook reshaping of the management of their energy demand with a focus on community-owned energies to supply energy to all residents, not just a few. Probably one of the most well-known example is the island of Egg, where they are self-sufficient in energy uses, and they only use what they make. The Isles of Scilly has majority of land. The Isles of Scilly, a majority of land and property ownership resides with absentee landlords who may be difficult to engage with and have a different priority than the Council of the Isles of Scilly. The report states Scilly has the highest rate of electric usage in the UK and fuel poverty and high carbon intensity local economy. It also refers to disparity and inequality with fuel poverty. Not all residents from the Isles of Scilly live in social housing. We may live in poorly insulated homes on low fixed incomes. And I think that the Smart Island project probably generated a greater sense of inequality regarding fuel poverty. The report states that no officer time was funded, and I know Nicola referred to the unequal burden. And that's the question I'm asking is, I'm able to locate how much officer time was required and what additional cost that was to the Council of the Isles of Scilly. I would guess that if the Smart Island project came again, it would be really better public engagement and better community benefits. The majority of people now, and I include myself in that, are more focused on their energy consumption and the cost and where their energy comes from. And I think cost is often a driver to how we change our behaviour. As the report states, it's time for a new episode, and I agree with that. And I'm looking forward to the floating offshore wind workshop in November. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work on that and your comments, Councillor Bedford. Councillor Sims, please.
I think I've got longest involvement in this project than anybody else in the room, and I wasn't there at the beginning of it. I think Richard McCarthy was the member involved in it. And I think I probably got involved in 2016. And what I did mention at the time that when we had meetings, I thought there was a lot of optimism bias within the process, and there was an awful lot of optimism bias. And I wasn't really particularly familiar with the term then. I very much am now, though. But overall, there has definitely been a considerable net benefit to the islands from the project, and as Harry alluded to, it was an innovation project, and therefore risk is inherent in it. But we have the charging points, we have lots of PV panels. If we had managed to successfully get the white label thing working so that we could have sold electricity to the grid, that would have fallen over in the last 18 months because of the energy situation. And regarding your point regarding the energy users over here, that's essentially because we haven't got access to pipe gas. So that's not anything to do with, which is probably a good thing at the minute. But it's not actually really quite a Smart Island consideration. But so I think they've already been seconded. So I'm happy to support the proposals, but I would not. The main lesson from the whole process for me was optimism bias, and I don't think we've yet got around that. We have a number of other projects which I think we are susceptible to optimism bias as well. But overall, it was positive. It was positive for the islands, but I would say that it was consulted to death. There was an immense amount of consultation on it. The problem with it was it was extremely difficult to tell people what it was in 1.5 minutes, and by that time they switched off. And it was a very, very complicated process, very, very difficult to explain, and therefore you lose the engagement. But you couldn't make it simple because it would have just been islands. There'd have been no smart in it.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I can remember officers sitting there and officers talking about the project and realising that officers didn't really understand what they were talking about. So in order to communicate something, you have to understand it, and it was such a vague project that, although good, it was hard to communicate to the public. I would agree with Councillor Sims, optimism bias was a problem from the start, and there is optimism bias even now in the project, even in this report as well. Paragraph at the end, it says about consultation. but we've seen what's happened with the consultation with the museum planning application, that, you know, things can always be done better. So we need to make sure that we're always examining ourselves and striving to do better. I had a couple of specific questions I asked Jim via email when the paper came out last month. One was about, you know, how much reduction in domestic bills have we seen for people? I'm aware that some people with solar panels haven't seen reduction in their bills. I'd like to see a commitment from the council to ensure that everyone who has panels gets a reduction in their bills, so we can make sure that the most vulnerable people in council housing do have a benefit from this project, even if the general population haven't.
Director Nicola.
Thank you. I think it's difficult to make people reduce their bills, because what we have experienced in feedback from some of our tenants is that they've paid more for the heating, or they've continued to maintain their payments for heating, but they're more comfortable. So it's their choice to spend what they would like on heating bills. So it's not within our gift to tell people to reduce their bills. It's their choice. But what we have given them is that choice in providing either air source heat pumps or renewable energy solar panels to reduce the bills if they would like to see their bills reduced. But some people have chosen the comfort that's now provided.
I'm aware that people don't feel like they've had that choice. So can we just reiterate that with council tenants, that they have these facilities available? It should enable them to reduce their bills if they so wish. So I am aware that people with solar panels and air source heat pumps feel that they are making no difference to their bills at all when they should be. So it's about education of the council tenants, I think. Maybe I'll discuss this in more of a private session where I can get my point across. Also, I was reading the report, the desal plant. South West Water been charged for their electricity yet?
No, they're not.
No. Is there plans to? Because we're adding to the profits of the private organisation there, aren't we? So.
Yes, I mean, that will sort of come into the subject of the second paper, which includes potential revenue streams from that.
Cool. Okay, I'll leave.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we've got a proposer and a seconder for the adoption of these recommendations. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. We'll move swiftly on to item 15, which is also in your hands, which is the asset legacy and business case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, as I said, this follows directly on from the previous paper, which outlines what the programme was, what the projects were, and what assets have resulted from that. So this now very much looks at, while that was a backwards-looking process and making a decision about a programme, this now very much says, well, what have we got from Smart Islands and what are we going to do with those? I've grouped the assets into three categories, A, B and C. A being those assets that photovoltaics, heat pumps, batteries, etc., that sit on council domestic properties. Category B assets, which are the solar assets and batteries that sit on the commercial sites and the desalination plant, for example, that's already been mentioned. And category C are the assets that have resulted from the GoEV project, namely the solar charging points, the vehicles, and the solar canopies and associated control infrastructure. The report outlines a number of business case options for the future management of those assets. The first of those is for the assets to be owned and managed by the Isles City Community Venture. The second is for them to continue in the ownership of the council. And the third is an option that shows the business case for the council operating the assets if it were able to get a power purchase agreement. And we believe through our current research that the third option is not viable due to the fact that the council and the availability of PPAs on the market for the size of the assets and the type of organisation the council is would not be able to go ahead. But it's put there anyway as reference because the market could change and circumstances could change. The report provides quite a lot of additional detail on the GoEV project, with information on uptake and usage of that, as that forms a major part of the business case and is the major asset that will provide community benefit going forward and is providing community benefit at the moment. So we've got really good uptake. We've got really good uptake across a broad spectrum of users. We've got usage by residents on the island. We've got good usage by the council itself. We've got good usage by businesses on island, and we've got very good usage by visiting businesses who are no longer bringing vehicles to the island but renting the vehicles that we've got here. On the balance of the options presented in the business cases, the report recommends the option to transfer the assets to the community venture, given that the numbers show that this is the most viable business case going forward. It is recognised in the report that the transfer process, there is a process to go through for transfer, and doing that correctly is of the utmost importance. So final authority is given to sign off by the CEO, Section 151 officer, and the monitoring officer within the recommendation. So if it's recommended, agreed here, it will still have to go through that stage gate before approval for asset transfer is finally given. And in particular, we have made reference there to the asset transfer being subsidy compliant, given the new rules that have come in post-Brexit around that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Jim. Councillor Legg, please.
Thank you. Yes, so it was sort of always the plan that the GoEV assets would be transferred to the community venture, and my understanding was the solar assets as well. That was the intention from the outset. It would appear from the business case that the community venture would be successful. Would the community, I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask this, but would the community venture be looking to sort of tread water, or would they be looking to expand and grow?
The community venture would use this as a stepping stone to expand and grow, absolutely. So the community venture is already applying for other pots of funding, has won some funding recently to do a project in conjunction with the school, so working in Project Week, which I think is next week in fact, to develop a grid share interface so that the islands can see what's going on energy-wise, and also to create a network of data network on Scilly that will allow data to be pushed into that grid share. And it's a data network that could be used by other organisations in the future. So, for example, South West Water, if they chose to use smart metering for that, could piggyback on this project. So yes, the idea is that the community venture would springboard off this project.
So we would be looking at more further benefit if we were to choose transferring the assets to the community venture, and thus increasing the legacy of Smart Island. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grottek, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree that this is the way forward. I would just say that the council have actually inherited quite a liability with regard to the assets upon their social housing. I mean, solar panels will need to be replaced, and heat pumps are not an insignificant item of maintenance expenditure, so obviously we've got to take that into account. I wish the community venture the very best. We did actually make a formal resolution in Council in 2016 to actually support the appointment of new directors, and it was disappointing that that is only actually coming to fruition now for whatever reason. So I certainly hope that they will be able to strengthen their director base. I have heard, I won't mention her name, but there is a very strong lady who works for our council who has recently been appointed, I believe, and I think that will only be very good. Apart from that, I would only counsel, and perhaps it's not for me to counsel, that community venture actually only expand carefully, not exactly, don't be too aspirational. The whole Smart Islands project was too aspirational at the outset. We've mentioned optimum bias. I would only ask that the directors and officers of the community venture company don't actually indulge in too much optimum bias, but carefully look at all the options before they move forward. And apart from that, I do think, having spoken to the 151 officer and other of our officers, that this is the way forward, and I wish the community venture every success as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, my question was specifically to do with the GoEV side of things, and in this report and the previous one, it seems like there's quite a timid, soft launch of getting the GoEV scheme in the public domain, although it's been used quite extensively. And I was just wondering why the community venture aren't shouting a bit more about that. It seems there's lots of talk about testing and now analysing things, but when can we expect to see a bigger push for that side of things?
I think one of the reasons, there's a number of reasons not to have pushed for a big launch to start with was the testing side of things. But also we have seen naturally very good uptake of the scheme. And as we've embedded it, the uptake that has naturally occurred has met the resource that we've got to look after that, whilst delivering on all the other innovation aspects of the project. But I think you're right. I think now could be the time, or coming up to the time, where we have embedded lots of the learning. The app for booking the systems has become much more stable. And it could now be the time to do a bigger launch of the project, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Roger.
We've noted in paragraph 20 and 21 that the community venture has presented audited accounts, that it has directors and appointed new directors. There's very little detail there. I presume that's because of commercial confidence. Just why there's very little detail in those two paragraphs.
It's not necessarily because of commercial confidence, because the accounts would be available on Companies House. So yeah, they are publicly available.
One question: I assume that as the CV, I don't have a problem with this, and that it's the way forward. But once the CVC is incorporated and has these assets and things, if it's occupying council property for its office space, I assume a commercial rent will be charged.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Mumford, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask a question about the off-islands? I don't know whether Councillor Legg has got any information. Have they got their... they've got their charging points, I believe, and their charging points are on St Martin's. There's no information going out there, as far as I know, or what's going on. Are they going to get a vehicle, etc., etc.?
So you're correct. The charging points are all installed. The only one that's still got something left to install is St Agnes, where we're installing batteries. And there's been a supply chain issue, but that should be being finished off in October. So that's the charging point side of things. That will allow charging either for a car share vehicle or for public charging, as we've got everywhere on St Mary's. In terms of a vehicle, we are actually currently consulting on St Martin's right now, out there, having a further consultation now that we've got the charging infrastructure in place, to see what type of vehicle would suit. And we had a session on St Agnes, it was yesterday, I believe, 2 days ago, to have a conversation. The reason we haven't just gone with a vehicle on like we've got on St Mary's is because the early feedback was that's possibly not the right type of vehicle for us. and we haven't yet come to a complete conclusion on what the right vehicle is. However, the report details that the programme has been extended to May 2023 through a project change request with the European Regional Development Funders, and we have got capital budget left, which has specifically been, amongst other things, been kept to look at providing the off-islands with the correct vehicle solution for them, which could result in not providing a vehicle if that is what is the chosen option, but we want to get it right. We don't just want to provide a vehicle that is then not used and not utilised properly.
Just wanted to make sure consultation was going on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
I just noticed, Jim, you're using we there. Is that the royal we, or is that, when this happens, does the council cut ties with the CIC and let them go and do their own thing?
Nicola, Director.
Yeah, so the project is owned by the council at this time. We cut ties once we've transferred the asset over. So the project finishes in May, transfer the asset over, it becomes a community ventures role to then operate it. So we run the project through the community venture at the moment. Come May, it'll pass to the community venture as their assets and their project to run.
Jim, to clarify an additional point there, the only official tie between the council and the community venture is a delivery partner agreement under the GoEV project, whereby we are instructed in it, the community venture is instructed by the council to deliver that project. Once that project ends, that agreement ends, and hopefully at that point the assets will have also transferred, if it is the agreement that the assets transfer.
Whereas meeting in the closure report, there was talk about officer time and it being unpaid for. I'm just worried that that's going to continue on, but it'd be good just to let them stand on their own 2 feet and waddle away out of here. So
I think that's one of the reasons for doing the asset transfer ahead of the end of the project, is that the time spent on it can be done within project time.
Thank you, Councillor Legg. The assets for the off-islands that were just mentioned, would they come under Group C and be transferred to the community venture, or would they be a group of their own that isn't mentioned in the report?
That is a very good point, because conversations with the off-islands had been had about what the ownership model of those assets could be. So there is potential, you're correct, Harry, in some of the assets being transferred to another organisation on the off-islands, or anywhere else, in fact, where it would be appropriate for that asset. So, for example, if St Agnes ended up with a very specific vehicle that was specific for a very specific use on St Agnes, it might be more appropriate that an organisation on St Agnes owned and looked after that asset rather than it becoming part of the overall group in C.
Okay, thank you. So, do I have a proposer and a seconder, please, for these recommendations? Councillor Mumford, Councillor Legg. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you for your report, Jim. Thank you. So we come to the last item on our agenda, item number 16, which is the terms of reference for Safe as Scilly, the Isles of Scilly Community Safety Partnership, which is in the hands of our Chief Executive, Paul Masters. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, members. Very brief from me, and then I'd like to hand over to Councillor Roger, if that's okay. Obviously, this is bringing to Council the terms of reference of the Community Safety Partnership, which was a recommendation from the Scrutiny Committee. Members obviously are aware, or should be aware, that the Community Safety Partnership is a statutory partnership, i.e. one that we have to form and be part of under the Crime and Disorder Act. And therefore, the Scrutiny Committee felt that it was important that all members had sight of those terms of reference and were able to comment on them, so that we are absolutely playing our part as a key member of that partnership alongside other statutory partners as well. So it's for you to have sight of those terms of reference and make any comment on them as a recommendation on from scrutiny. And perhaps now further comments from the lead member, Ewan Roger.
Thank you, Paul.
Nothing further to add, but very happy to. It's the first time these have come to full council. The community, well, the Safer Scilly, as we now refer to it, is going through a lot of change, and this is all part of it. We've been to scrutiny, and now putting this in front of yourselves to demonstrate the work being done. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. First of all, Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Ewan. Really good terms of reference. I understand the next step is to set out a Safer Scilly partnership plan and delivery plan that has to be brought to scrutiny towards the end of the year. And I think it would be interesting to have a shared vision of promoting public reassurance. But part of that, I understand, is promoting the importance of road safety, which is a bit of a bugbear with a lot of the members of the public at the moment.
We've already taken our plan to scrutiny as we did earlier this year, and we will take that again on an annual basis. That results in our work plan, which is up and running, and we only met yesterday post the latest initiative where we set up subgroups to drill down on the areas of domestic abuse and sexual violence, antisocial behaviour, communication, drug and alcohol use. Traffic is part of that, but traffic is also being dealt with within the corporate plan, and Tanya is doing a project on that, and that will dovetail with the Community Safety Partnership. Or Safer Scilly, I should keep saying.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you. Just a general comment, really. Thank you for the report, and I think the terms of reference are very good. But I would just say, on a broader front, perhaps, that I find the comment at the beginning of number 4, culture, absolutely wonderful as actually stating what we're all trying to do here. When we come together, we look at issues through the lens of the people we're looking at. I think that's really good.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically related to the terms of reference, but it built on Councillor Bedford's point about road safety. I'd like to see either the council or Safer Scilly or a combination doing some sort of promotion about anti-drink riding in the build-up to Christmas. It's not unusual to see that sort of message around the Christmas time. So whether there's still time to give some thought to how we communicate that, I think it would be worthwhile.
I think you'll see that come from the policing team, Joel, and you'll notice down by the school that we have recently put out some what they call speed buddies. They're at Old Town and just at the corner by Old Town Church and one in the school area as well. And they're put out on a daily basis, just highlighting for people to slow down in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. So, do I have a proposer, please, for this, and a seconder? Councillor Sims, Councillor Mumford, all those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Ewan, for your work on this. Thank you. So that brings us to the end. Sorry, Councillor Sims.
It's not to do with the meeting. Paul, we've got a transport board tomorrow, haven't we? I haven't got an invite. I just wondered if you could send one through.
Thank you. Members, that brings us to the end of this full council. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you.